This trip I went to the areas Champagne, Argonne and Verdun, north of the road from Reims to Verdun. The video was shot on the hoof before reading documents. I'm sorry about the wind noise, and also some of the numbers are wrong for casualties and distances. They're not quite right, but they give an approximation. I spent 1 day in Champagne region, 1 in the Argonne and 1 in Verdun region. Only the main campaigns are mentioned. For Champagne in 1914 to 15, Verdun in 1916 and the Argonne in 1918. The total length of the front in the First World War in the trench system was about 450 miles. Only about 120 of this was held by the British and their allies, and most of it was held by the French, and a lot of it got completely devastated in the process, and the villages and the land were never recovered, and they're now called Zone Rouge. And this is an example of an old trench system which is still left from that period. The Navarin Memorial to 30,000 Frenchmen killed on this part of the battlefield in the Champagne area. A view of the trench system at Messige. I think in the far distance there, that's the Argonne forest, which was the scene of a lot of battles involving the Americans. But Messige was primarily a French fortress once they recaptured it from the Germans. This is the trench system at Messige, partly reconstructed, but said to be very realistic.
It is realistic, isn't it? There's the apertures for the firing the guns.
Yes. Here is up the top of the WW1. You can see why it was so extensively fought over. The artillery observation from here is excellent, and that will be looking north into German-held territory in the direction of Sedan. And over on the left there, in the distance, is pretty much the northernmost limit of the Argonne forest. And the French managed to advance on the right of the forest because they weren't held up by the machine guns and the valleys and so on, and jungle fighting within the forest. But the Americans eventually captured the whole of the Argonne forest. This is the Meuse-Argonne Memorial, built in memory of the Americans who died in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. And it was called Meuse-Argonne, although it's actually near the Argonne forest, because the general area is known as Meuse. It's about 50 miles south of Sedan, which was the ultimate objective. And there are stairs up to the viewing platform, which is about 200 feet above ground level. Here we are at the top of the Montfaucon Memorial. Over in that direction, in the very far distance, is Verdun, which was a French sector, of course. Right in front of us here is the woods of Montfaucon, and then there's the WW1 where we were this morning, and further round still, that of course is all the American sector in the Argonne forest, and then there's the rest of the Argonne forest, and over to the west of that there's the Champagne region, which was of course a French sector. This is looking north from the Montfaucon Memorial. Over there, 50 kilometers away, is Sedan, where was the vital German supply railhead. And there's the whole of the northern battlefield. They didn't get quite as far as Sedan before the armistice. And there is the whole of the northern battlefield, which was attacked in a joint operation between the French in greater numbers and the Americans as well. Day 3, I'm standing on the top of Fort Douaumont, and Verdun is about 5 or 6 miles in that direction. Fort Douaumont was about as near as the Germans got to Verdun, so they could not shell it with their shorter range weapons, only the very heavy artillery. It was planned to capture heights nearer to Verdun, which was surrounded by this system of forts, but the French held them off. Here's a view of Fort Douaumont. At the time of its capture, it was only manned by 57 soldiers, and it had just 2 guns left in it. So from a military offensive point of view, it was not very important, but it was a sort of a famous and strategic point. Over there, Verdun West Bank, the Germans got within about 4 or 5 miles of that at the closest point, and was coming round. Over there, the East Bank, and about 4 or 5 miles out of town, the French attacked the Germans from the east, and they were able to successfully attack the flank, basically, which kept them out of the town and engaged in infantry fighting. Here's a rather nice touch near the centre of Verdun, a fountain. Opposite, some Art Deco style building. This is Hill 304, on the opposite side of the river Meuse to Douaumont, and down below there the Germans on the other bank were in range of the French artillery, and so there was a tremendous scrap for this area. Through that gap in the trees one can just about make out the lower ground where the Germans were on the other side of the river Meuse. It's possible for the heavy guns to shell them from here, but not the 75, the smaller horse artillery. Here near Hill 304 is an example of Zone Rouge, where they've just let the trees grow up and not bothered to try and reclaim the land. And here's the remains of a trench, and under there are buried lots of shells and artifacts. This is another place on the opposite side of the river to Fort Douaumont. It's called Mort Homme, and it was about as far as south as the Germans got, and they were stuck here, and the Battle of the Somme started, and the German commander von Falkenhayn was fired, and then the French started to advance north. Notably, they captured most of the land that they'd lost. Nivelle, the General Nivelle, played a big part in this, and that concludes the visit to Champagne, Argonne, Verdun.